You've seen this moment before. A panicked engineer, a runaway reactor, a hand slamming down on a red button as the alarms scream and the world ends. That's the version a television series put in your head. And almost none of it is true. It's 23 minutes past 1 in the morning, the 26th of April, 1986. And the truth of what's about to happen in this room is quieter than the story you know, and far more disturbing. Because for the entire last hour of Reactor 4's life, the men in this control room are calm. They believe they're running a routine safety test. And at almost every second of that hour, the reactor can still be saved. Until one exact second, when it can't. Tonight, I'm going to show you where that line was. The last instant Chernobyl could have been last could have been stopped, and what happened the moment after it was crossed. To understand the last hour, you need 3 people. Alexander Akimov, the shift supervisor, 33 years old, careful, by the book. Tonight, the test is his to run. Leonid Toptunov, the reactor control engineer with his hands on the controls. He is 25 years old. And standing behind them, Anatoly Dyatlov, the deputy chief engineer, the man in the room you do not argue with. Hold on to their faces for a moment, because within 3 weeks 2 of these men will be dead, and the third will be put on trial. But right now, none of that has happened. Right now, it's just a slow night shift and a test almost nobody wanted to stay late for. And here's the first thing nobody tells you. The thing that destroyed Chernobyl was a safety test. A check to prove that if the plant lost power, a spinning turbine could keep the cooling pumps alive for the few seconds before the backup generators woke up. That's all it was. Other plants didn't even bother running it. As far as anyone in this room can see, the reactor is stable. It is not. And to understand why, you need to know about 3 things hiding inside the core tonight. Watch them closely, because in about 40 minutes, all 3 go off at once. The first is the water. The water flowing into the bottom of the core is hot, sitting right at the edge of the boiling. One small push and it turns to steam. The second is the reactor's temper. Most reactors calm themselves down when the water inside them boils, they lose power. This one does the opposite. Boil the water and it speeds up. More steam, more power, more steam. A machine that, pushed the wrong way, feeds on itself. And the third is a secret hidden in the control rods. The rods are how you shut a reactor down. But these rods are tipped with graphite, and graphite doesn't slow a reactor down, it speeds it up. So for the first moment a rod drops, it doesn't hit the brakes. It hits the gas. Remember that one. It's about to matter more than anything else in this entire story. None of these were secrets to the physicists who built it. They were secrets to the men in the room. Everything looked stable. That was the trap. At 4 seconds past 1:23 in the morning, the order comes. The turbine is cut loose from the reactor. The test begins. And the clock starts running, along with something none of them can see yet. Now here's a detail that should stop you cold. The test worked. The data from that machine survives to this day, and it proves the experiment succeeded. They passed, and the reactor would explode anyway. Hold that contradiction in your head, because everything from here is the story of how both of those things are true at the same time. As the turbine slows, less water moves through the core. The water that's left starts to boil. Steam begins to form. And you remember what steam does inside this particular reactor. Power begins to creep upward, slowly, quietly, and here's the cruelest part of the entire night. The men watching it are blind. There was a single number that could have told them how little safety margin they had left. That number wasn't on any screen in the room. The last reading they'd seen was 10 minutes old. They believed they had room to spare. They had almost none. Around now, Toptunov turns and says something to Akimov. We don't know what. The words are lost to history. Whatever it is, Akimov gives a small tap of his finger, carry on, and turns back to the dials. Sit with that image for a second. No alarm, no panic, no sense that anything is wrong at all. The worst accident in the history of nuclear power is now seconds away. and the men who will be blamed for it are standing in a quiet room, satisfied that a good test is wrapping up. The story you were told says they panicked. They were calm. And somehow, that is so much worse. 39 seconds past 1:23, Leonid Toptunov reaches out and presses the emergency shutdown, the button you've heard so much about. A Z5. And here is where everything you think you know falls apart. He is not panicking. No alarm has sounded. Pressing this button at the end of a test is normal. It is simply how you put the reactor to sleep. A 25-year-old is doing his job correctly on a successful night. And in doing it correctly, he has just killed everyone who is going to die. To understand how, you finally have to see what happens inside the core in the next 4 seconds. The rods begin to fall from the top, and at first, it works. The part that's meant to absorb the reaction slides in, and the power starts to drop. For 1 second, the shutdown is doing exactly its job. But remember the graphite tips. As the rods enter from the top, their graphite ends shove the water out of the bottom of the core. And in this reactor, that water had been helping to hold the reaction down. So at the bottom, the rods aren't shutting anything off, they're tearing the brakes away, and now all three things fire at once. The graphite displaces the water. The reaction surges. The hot water already on the edge flashes to steam. The steam adds power. The power adds steam. The loop you were warned about 40 minutes ago slams shut. At 42 seconds past 1:23, the bottom of the reactor crosses a line. Physicists call it prompt criticality. In plain words, the chain reaction is now feeding itself faster than any human, any rod, any system on Earth can answer. This is the second. Up to here, it could still have been stopped. After here, nothing in the universe could. In the fraction of a second that follows, the bottom of the core reaches an output of around 345 gigawatts, more than 100 times what this reactor was built to produce, all of it concentrated in a space you could walk across. The rods are still falling. They just don't matter anymore. The first thing the men felt wasn't an alarm, it was a sound. One survivor, Yuri Tregub, could barely describe it. The closest he came was this. A heavy vehicle at full speed slamming on the brakes and spinning out. A roar that deepened into a rumble. The floor began to vibrate. Another, Razim Davletbayev, had worked nuclear plants for years and lived through emergencies, and he'd never heard anything like this. A low hum, he said, like a person moaning. It is the same sound people describe in the moments before earthquakes, before volcanoes. And all at once, the room understands, this is not a test anymore. Akimov shouts across the control room, shut it down, and runs for the panel, trying to reach it, to stop it, to undo it. But the rods are already falling. The shutdown is already running. The shutdown is the cause. There is nothing left to push. And then the welds give. Engineers had quietly known for years that the seals inside this reactor were weak. Tonight, that knowledge arrives too late. The last of the water flashes to steam, and a second pulse larger than the first tears through the bottom of the core. Pressure the machine was never built to hold throws itself against everything holding the reactor together. Witnesses heard it. Seismographs miles away recorded it. 2 sharp explosions close together and then a third, far larger. At 45 seconds past 1:23 in the morning, it is over. Reactor 4 no longer exists. So here is the question those men have carried for 40 years. Why didn't they stop it? They did. They pressed the button built to stop it, and the machine punished them for obeying it. And the detail that haunts the people who study this most? It was avoidable, right to the very end. There was a second set of rods that came up from the bottom of the core. If they had been wired into that emergency button, they would have killed the surge before it ever began. On the reactor next door, they already were. The fix for this one had been approved. It was sitting in paperwork. It was, quite literally, days away. After the explosion, the science we trust starts to break down. The models fail. The theories multiply. We can describe the wreckage, the 2,000-ton shield blasted up through the roof of the hull, the core driven downward into the earth beneath it. But the exact order of those final fractions of a second we may never fully know. What we do know is this. The first man to die that night was named Valery Kodemchuk, a pump operator standing near his machines when the building came down on top of them. His body was never found. He is still there, somewhere inside what's left of the reactor he was running. He was the first. He was very far from the last. The test was a success. The reactor just didn't survive it.